A legend of empresses in the palace, where 100 flowers compete for beauty and fall into a white and clean state, while the myriad of beauties share the same sorrow but nourish new life like falling red. When reading the article, I sympathize with the silent mother and daughter of Empress Ying and Empress Huaishu. Through their eyes, this article looks at Zhen Huan, who has gained everything but lost everything, Empress Duan Gui, who has 1,000 knots in her heart, and Empress Dowager Duan Gui, who has just entered the palace and competed for beauty in the imperial harem. It can be said that the magnificent picture of the Zhengzhang New Dynasty is similar year by year, but different people year by year. Fortunately, Huai Shu was born into the imperial family, but ultimately became a guest of the imperial family. I will find my own happiness. P.S. Huai Shu Emperor Ji is an old version character, named as the 6th daughter of Xianling, and her biological father may also be Lu Li. I use novels to promote my peers' keywords of the novel. Empress Dowager Huaishu of the Harem without pop-ups, complete collection download of Empress Dowager Huaishu of the Harem TXT, latest chapter reading of Empress Dowager Huaishu of the Harem. Chapter 1. Empress Dowager. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Empress Dowager. This spring, the rain is particularly abundant. Even in a remote place like Ningxiu Palace, the flowers and plants in the courtyard are thriving and full of a prosperous atmosphere. I gently pushed open the Qiansha window. I thought my strength was extremely light, but I didn't expect to startle away the birds perched on the trees in the front yard. Upon hearing the birds chirping together, I turned my head in surprise and said, "Mother, come and take a look. It's a magpie, a good omen." My mother's consort, Princess Jiang, was dressed in a smoky purple Su brocade robe, woven with emerald green peacock feather threads using the flat gold needle technique, paired with a silver white skirt. It is very in line with her quiet and delicate temperament, not seeing how age ages. She heard me speak and smiled sweetly, saying, "Zipei is really the Empress Dowager of the heavenly family." Without even seeing her, she said she was a magpie. When I saw my mother Empress see through, I didn't worry either. I snuggled up in her arms and coquettishly asked, "How does my mother Empress know that I didn't see what kind of bird that was?" She gently caressed the green jade and flower petals on my head. "Silly child, before my mother consort entered the Pingyang prince's mansion, she also lived in the countryside and was close to the fields every day. This call is clearly called Heavenly Sun, and this bird flies extremely fast. It is also something that the Qijin Bureau has never raised before. No wonder my daughter, Zhang Guanli Dai, whose 10 fingers do not touch the water of spring." I sighed and said, "My daughter has never taken half a step out of the purple Ao city since she was young. She must be cautious in everything and dare not make mistakes. When it comes to her childlike nature, how can she compare to a mother's consort?" The Empress Dowager sighed deeply and said, "Alas, what about the childlike charm of the heavenly family? It's not that I will eventually lose it. My father passed away when I was 10 years old, and my mother was an incompetent Taoist family. As tenants left one after another, the harvest declined year by year. There were still several brothers in the family to support, so I had to ask my uncle to take the Empress Dowager to the palace as a dancer. Later, I became a concubine in a confused way, and I never saw my family again. I regret my words. Although my mother is now elevated to the rank of Grand Consort, she has always been criticized for her humble background. And the mother consort is such a quiet and delicate woman, not caring about the coldness and contempt of others. But half a lifetime of sadness for the sake of parting." Thinking of this, I pretended to be dissatisfied and said, "Mother isn't Zipei your family member?" Upon hearing this, the Empress Dowager also smiled, warm and in harmony with the spring scenery. "Yes, it's fortunate to have you," she said. The Empress Dowager spoke and gently stroked the broken hair in front of my forehead. Although I had not yet reached my hairpin, the Empress Dowager of the heavenly family often had to focus on makeup to showcase the grandeur of our Zhou royal family. So I also learned from a few imperial sisters to comb various noble women's hair buns, only spreading the back hair to indicate that I am still a daughter to be married. But girls are young, and if their hair is not thick and slender enough, it is often difficult to shape it. Just like my only sister, who was also the only biological daughter of Empress Dowager Zhen in the current dynasty, Shuebua, often complained that her hair was too thin, unlike me who could almost comb various complex hairstyles. In fact, Snow Soul already has too many things that I, and even all the women in the palace, envy. Amazing appearance, legitimate value, and unparalleled favor and protection from the Empress Dowager and her brother. But she, who has always been a proud child and doesn't know what to expect from a young age, doesn't know how to cherish it, just like she doesn't understand why I never combed those girls' fancy hairstyles in front of her. Of course, Shuepa is not someone who does everything by spoiling her. She was spoiled but not spoiled, which I only realized a long time later. I was wandering here, but my mother was full of love and said, "Payer, your hair is really good, it looks like. It's really much stronger than my mother's." I didn't pay attention to the subtle emotional changes in my mother's words, just obediently said, "My mother's hair is good." As Duan's mother said, she started using black hair cream at your age, but you still have hair like a waterfall, which makes you look young. Even standing with the concubine chosen by the imperial brother this time, you can't give up too much. Most women love to praise their appearance, but the Empress Dowager only gave a bitter smile, as if she didn't listen to what I said earlier. I realized something was wrong and quickly asked, "Empress Dowager, what are you thinking?" Mother Fei was taken aback and immediately smiled, saying, "Mother Fei naturally thinks of you. By the way, Payer, you just talked about Empress Dowager Gui. Did you go to greet some sisters today?" When I arrived at the Longevity Palace, Empress Dowager Zheni also came to chat with Empress Jingda. When Aunt Hanju led me into the house, she even joked, "Empress Dowager has arrived. Our mother says that our muddy fetus is lifeless and boring, and we get annoyed when we see it." It's still the children's joyful laughter. I smiled upon hearing this. Apart from the Empress Dowager and the bedridden consort Duanmu, Consort De was the most respected in the imperial harem of my father. Her kindness and generosity are well known in the palace. Of course, Empress Dowager De is also famous for her love for children. Even my empress, who comes from a humble background and is not very favored by my father, was taken care of by her when I was young. Every time I see her, I always ask questions. But such a loving mother never appeared in her lifetime. Even at this age, she occasionally reveals regret. The kind of regret that is not heart-wrenching, but deeply ingrained in the bone marrow and endless, is enough to make her imperial consort's honor, wealth, and vastness like smoke. Especially her only adopted daughter, Princess Yong and sister Abayu, married a prominent family 4 years ago. She became even more lonely. I was only 10 years old at the time, and I still remember the dignified and gentle Empress Dowager crying loudly, kneeling in front of the Empress Dowager and the Emperor, only hoping not to let sister Abayu spend her entire life without seeing her. But the Empress Dowager sighed and said slowly, "Sister Feng, Abayu is also the daughter of the AI family. However, as an imperial concubine, this is her inevitable fate." Finally, when Sister Abayu went to the Purple Terrace and Lian Capsule Desert. Since the founding of the 5 dynasties of the Zhou dynasty, she has become the only genuine and, of course, the only princess born to the Empress Dowager. Later on, it was proven that the Empress Dowager's decision to abandon Su's biological daughter was extremely correct. After opening up a hidden danger that had been threatening the stability of the Zhou dynasty for 100 years, it was finally eradicated in the Zhengzhang era. And Empress Dowager Mingyi's broad-mindedness and courage are even more impressive for thousands of years. However, for Empress Dowager, it has nothing to do with her lonely remaining life. Empress Dowager 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 Concubine Zhen said with a smile, "It's eccentric. I've been sitting here for a long time and won't even give ordinary dim sum. When Huai Shu came, you ordered Hanju to cook." I felt embarrassed and said, "Empress Dowager Zhen is the most gentle. Why do you have to make fun of Huai Shu today?" Empress Dowager 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 Dowager. I was taken aback and almost blurted out, "Brother Yu Pei is getting married." Consort Chen smiled but remained silent. Today, she was wearing a bright yellow woven flower spring shirt, with a red gold and 2 immortal long hairpin on her bun. Despite her festive and bright attire, there was only silence on her body. It is pleasing and comfortable to the eye. On the other hand, Aunt Kikyu beside her answered for her master, Empress Dowager. Imagine that the Empress Dowager has already arranged the selection process with the Ministry of Rights. There are more than 10 million beautiful women. In addition to enriching the imperial harem and breeding the royal family, it is natural to choose 2 more princesses. Otherwise, the beauty around the emperor would be like a cloud, and the Jin and Qinghe kings would be alone. With our emperor's benevolence and filial piety, we naturally would not be willing. This article takes Empress Huaishu as the first person. Empress Huaishu's concubine, named Zi Pei, was trained by her birth mother to be Empress Dowager Jiang to pick apples. Empress Dowager Zhen Su Yeni, was originally granted the title of First Lady Zhen and had a second prince named Yu Pei. Consort Feng Ruozhao, former consort Jing, and adopted daughter Princess Yong'an, Abayu. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Auntie Jinxi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Auntie Jinxi. I just remembered that there was a rumor that the emperor brother was going to be selected. He is already 16 years old. When my father was as old as him, he had already married and had a son. But now, except for a newly registered concubine named Ying, the imperial brother's position in the harem is still vacant. It is reasonable to choose beautiful women at this time. Throughout history, the royal draft has selected not only the imperial consort, but also the queen. Just like my sister in-law, Empress Qi Su, was born as a lady and was personally married by her father. It has been passed down as a beautiful story to this day. Empress Dowager Zhen finally spoke up and said, "Last time, the Empress Dowager told me that Pei and Yuhan are both 17 years old and it's time to become Empress Dowager Zheng. To be honest, I naturally hope that he will get married and bear fruit soon. But this is the first draft of the Zhengzhang Dynasty. It's about the position of the imperial palace. I don't have many idle people to comment on, and everything depends solely on the Empress Dowager's sister." When she mentioned the Empress Dowager, my mind moved and I quietly gazed at her with the remaining light. But the expression of consort Chenmu remained calm as before. Even with a slight smile, there was no hint of dissatisfaction. Is that a sign of absolute trust in the Empress Dowager? Legend has it that the Empress Dowager showed great care for the children of the late emperor, not to mention treating her deceased brother as if she had left, and holding up the throne of the emperor with one hand. Even Empress Chenmu was able to give birth to the second prince safely under the harem of Empress Wenyu, thanks to her assistance. So for more than 10 years, Empress Dowager Zhen has been close to the Empress Dowager, and even when she is facing enemies on all sides, she is willing to speak out for support. But shouldn't she cherish her biological daughter even more? Thinking of the hazy moon sister from thousands of miles away, and Lingxi's sister. I can't do anything, I can only sigh in my heart. Amidst foreign lands and lonely old age, these fates that all daughters in the world fear happen to them. Just because, is it Empress Dowager Zhen's daughter? Empress Dowager lowered her head and took a sip of her tea, then asked me, a few days ago, I heard that Empress Dowager Cheng was not doing well. I, as an old lady, was too tired and lazy to go and take a look. Is everything better now? I replied, thank you very much for your concern, Empress Dowager. It's because Empress Dowager Su didn't survive the severe illness in winter, and it's just a painful memory of her past love. Consort Chen also sighed, not to mention that Sister Ying and Consort Su lived in the palace together for too long. It was me. Thinking of the three beauties of the palace back then, I couldn't help but sigh and feel sad. Empress Dowager 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 Dowager. I was afraid of arousing Empress Dowager's nostalgia for Sister Abayu, so I quickly changed the topic and said something else. In fact, what the two female concubines said was not wrong. The female concubines and the concubines Luo Sisi, Su Gui, and Zhu Hanji were both recommended by the three royal mansions of Pingyang, Qishan, and Qinghe in the 22nd year of the Qianyuan reign to serve the late emperor in the palace. At that time, they were highly favored by their father and were jokingly referred to as the three beauties of the royal palace by others. Of course, they were also ridiculed for their background as servants. Empress Dowager is afraid that I might lose heart if I listen. It is said that at that time, Zhu Shi was the most blessed by the father and repeatedly promoted to the position of a noble concubine. She often served in front of the emperor, and everyone looked up twice. But people have their fortunes and misfortunes. Later, they angered their father and emperor by pleading for mercy for the uncle of the king of Qinghe in their words, and they fell out of favor, making it difficult to see the beauty of heaven. Finally submerged in the endless stream of beautiful family members in the late Qianyuan period. Later, when the imperial brother ascended the throne, the Empress Dowager remembered that she was recommended by her younger sister, Princess Yinfei of Qinghe. Taking good care of her, she was enfeoffed in the retirement palace of the Taigui concubine. Now it's no longer there. And Empress Dowager Yi has always been very close to Empress Wenyu, and has been proud of herself for some time under her shade. But later on, Empress Wenyu plotted to assassinate Empress Chenyuan, causing harm to the imperial heirs, and imprisoned the Fengyi palace for life. The Empress Dowager who came from behind naturally did not like her, and with the newcomer entering the palace, the imperial favor was less than 1 day a day. During the reign of Emperor Qianyuan, he was only a concubine. Along with some lower-ranking concubines, they were sent to the temple to become monks and pray for their father. There is no news now. Only my mother, due to her early pregnancy, was unable to serve her father's emperor. Although she was no longer favored as before after giving birth to me, she never suffered due to the birth of an imperial heir, and safely survived to the position of a noble concubine. After ascending to the throne, the imperial brother followed the example of the birth mother of the Prince of Pingyang, Chen Taifei, and was posthumously conferred the title of Taifei. Just as the Empress Dowager once said, only those who are trained like this can be called blessed and have future blessings. A few days ago, due to my mother's health not feeling well, I haven't been to Changshu Palace for a while. Today, it's rare for both of my mother's concubines to be very talkative. I sat with them for a while before getting up and saying goodbye. Before leaving, Empress Dowager De insisted on asking Aunt Hanju to escort me out. In fact, although the empresses are not worried about food and clothing. But on weekdays, there is no interest in life, and it is even worse than the deep palace silence and intrigue when my father was alive. Now it's just enough that the children are not around. In the old sisters who came from the Qianyuan dynasty together, concubine Duan Gui was in bed with a long illness. Concubine Xian Gong lived with Shu and her sister in the princess mansion, making the originally clean Sanzhou palace even more desolate. The Empress Dowager often said to our unmarried imperial concubines, although you may not be your biological mothers, at least you all call yourself mother consort and live together in the palace. When you have free time, go for more walks. Otherwise, if you surrender, it will be troublesome to come and see. As soon as I entered the Ningxiu palace, the maid Ru Xiu hurriedly stepped forward and said, "How did Empress Dowager Ji come back?" Aunt Jinxi, who was by the Empress Dowager's side just now, has been waiting in the side hall. I was shocked and quickly asked, "What's going on?" It was actually Cui Shangyi who came in person. Ru Xiu also said without much understanding, "I don't know. Aunt Cui just said she wants to find Empress Dowager, and the servant told Empress Dowager to accompany a few Empresses Dowagers. She's not in a hurry, she's just waiting there." I didn't care about thinking too much, so I finished my makeup and rushed to the side hall. Along the way, Cui Jinxi's mind kept spinning. She was the most capable palace maid by the Empress Dowager's side, accompanying her for more than 20 years. Now, she held the position of first-class official and was even granted a concubine position by the imperial brother. On weekdays, we illegitimate imperial concubines would respectfully shout "Auntie" when they saw that one. What did she come to Ningxiu Palace for? If summoned by the Empress Dowager, where can she personally deliver the message? Auntie Jinxi was indeed sitting there. She was already over 50 years old, and the meticulously combed palace maid's bun was already covered in gray and white spots. However, wearing only the heart plum blossom golden hairpin, it also made her look energetic. Although she held a prominent position, she never showed off her arrogance. When she saw me, she calmly and solemnly said, "I have seen Empress Huaishu, Empress Ji, and I am blessed with peace and prosperity. Although I have many thoughts, at this moment, I can only gently lift her up and say, hurry up and give up. Auntie has always been busy serving the Empress Dowager. How can I come here now when I have free time? But does the Empress Dowager have any orders?" Jinxi also smiled and said, "DG is really smart." It was the Empress Dowager who said that she had not seen her for many days. She was very worried about her. She especially asked the maidservants from Jiangnan to weave Yuqian Longjing and several the Nanling mountain blood swallows that just came in yesterday. They are all first-class goods. Please accept them. Ru Xiu's eyes widened as she listened, to the point where she couldn't blame her lack of insight. At this season, the Longjing has just been harvested before the rain, and it must have been urgently delivered from 800 miles. The stock must be very small, and no matter how round it is, it won't be my turn as a concubine. That blood swallow is even more of a first-class rare item. During the Longqing, Qianyuan, and other dynasties, only the central palace and the first-grade fourth consort were able to obtain it quantitatively. After his accession to the throne, the imperial brother practiced frugality, which consumed a huge amount of tribute in addition to being enshrined in the Empress Dowager's palace. Even he doesn't eat it often himself. I haven't seen a blood swallow before when I'm so big. I glanced at the gift box placed on the small table, which was just an ordinary decorated pine and crane holding box. It was not exquisite, nor was it sealed with the phoenix-patterned gift belt specially designed by the Ying Palace. To be polite to others, one must have a request. I really don't know what kind of labor the Empress Dowager, who is powerless, would bother with. The more I think in my heart, the less I understand, and the more hesitant I am to speak on my face. As time passed and the atmosphere became somewhat awkward, Aunt Jinxi finally spoke up and said, "Isn't it that Emperor Ji doesn't like these things?" Empress Dowager Zhen Huan. Emperor Zhengzhang bestowed nourishment upon her, and her birth mother, Empress Dowager Jiaohui, Shen Meizhuang. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Empress Dowager in Feishuang Palace. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 3. Empress Dowager in Feishuang Palace. Ru Xiu's eyes widened as she listened, to the point where she couldn't blame her lack of insight. After the Empress Dowager took charge of the inner palace, considering the extravagance and waste of the Zhen Huan dynasty, she no longer respected anything that excessively consumed the people's resources. At this season, the Longjing has just been harvested before the rain, and it must have been urgently delivered from 800 miles. The stalk must be very small, and no matter how round it is, it won't be my turn as a concubine. That blood swallow is even more of a first-class rare item. During the Longqing, Qianyuan, and other dynasties, only the central palace and the first-grade fourth consort were able to obtain it quantitatively. After his accession to the throne, the imperial brother practiced frugality, which consumed a huge amount of tribute in addition to being enshrined in the Empress Dowager's palace. Even he doesn't eat it often himself. I glanced at the gift box placed on the small table, which was just an ordinary decorated pine and crane holding box. It was not exquisite, nor was it sealed with the phoenix-patterned gift belt specially designed by the Ying Palace. To be polite to others, one must have a request. I really don't know what kind of labor the Empress Dowager, who is powerless, would bother with. The more I think in my heart, the less I understand, and the more hesitant I am to speak on my face. As time passed and the atmosphere became somewhat awkward, Aunt Jinxi finally spoke up and said, "Isn't it that Emperor Ji doesn't like these things?" I hurriedly said, "Auntie, what do you mean?" Although Huai Shu is young, the rules in the palace are clear. These treasures are not something I can enjoy. I will not receive rewards for my efforts, but the Empress Dowager's grace is not to be let down, so I don't know how to speak up. "Jean," she said, "Empress Dowager is really cautious, but you don't have to underestimate yourself. The Empress Dowager often says that among these Empress Dowagers, Empress Huaishu is the most humble and worry-free, and she is also the most filial to all the Empress Dowagers. Just now, I heard that Empress Dowager has gone to accompany Empress Dowager Duan again, which shows that the Empress Dowager has a reason for her heartache for you." I said, "Auntie, I admire you so much. Serving all the mothers and concubines is our duty as children. Besides, if we say filial piety, Huai Shu is not as good as Sister Jinxi." "Jean," she suddenly smiled and said slowly, "this is also the most precious thing for Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager has heard that Empress Jinxi has been eating less and losing a lot of weight in the Feishuang palace. Only when you go, Empress Dowager, can you make some progress with a happy smile." I see, the Empress Dowager didn't really mean to treat me well, she didn't borrow my hand to take care of her biological daughter. Having understood this point, I am not disappointed either. As my legitimate mother, Empress Dowager Zhen has treated me well. The inexplicable heavy reward actually makes me feel like there is hidden evil in it. My mother and daughter were able to survive the bloody Qianyuan dynasty safely, and there is no measure to prevent others. Thinking about this, my voice became more gentle and said, "The Empress Dowager is kind. Sister Jinxi can't turn around for a while. Huai Shu has been disciplined and loved by her sister all the year round. Now I must go to see her more and try my best to be a sister's." In the late autumn frost, a name is not an auspicious and festive name, and the location is even more remote. It takes less than half an hour to walk from the Sanshou Palace. Before the Chinese New Year this year, I, who was born and raised here, didn't even know that there was such a place in Zhou City. Ruwan has a wide popularity in the palace, but she has heard that it was a place where a prince suspected of rebellion was imprisoned for life in the early court. The palace people even feel a bit unlucky when mentioning this. But what lives now is the biological daughter of the current Empress Dowager, the twin sister of King Qinghe, and my sister, Emperor Jinxi Zhen Huan. This incident caused a great uproar among the royal family. Su Suixin, an old minister who had always been at odds with the Zhen family, once again wrote a letter condemning the Empress Dowager for poisoning her own daughter. Unable to bear it anymore, the imperial brother finally took him home for tea on the charge of criticizing the heavenly family and secretly observing the harem. Legend has it that this old man was so angry and sorrowful that he wanted to cry for the late emperor. I had no choice but to speak ill of him. If you know the true reason, you should know that the emperor's actions are enough to save the face of the late emperor. Royal privacy, where can outsiders chew their tongues? Being closer to my hometown makes me even more timid. Looking at the newly renovated but still desolate Feishuang Hall in front of me, the Hunan bamboo fence that has been remodeled with iron thistles around makes me feel eerie. I don't know why I can't take a step. It is said that the wind blowing on the face is not cold, but it is already late spring, and the early lotus in the Tay pond should have started to bud. Why does the wind blowing on the face still have a hint of coolness? Ru Xiu saw that it was not a problem and cautiously reminded him, Empress, look. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and finally walked in. The person who led me into the inner hall was Heng'er, the close mate of Sister Lingxi. Sister Lingxi only said to the public that she came to recuperate, and she only brought her with her since childhood, which was also shabby. The little girl, who followed the master, also wore a long robe. As soon as she saw me, she whispered, Empress, our empress is not thoughtful about tea and rice. She always carries a string of Buddha beads and sometimes sits there in a daze all day without speaking. Although Dr. Wei comes to see us every day, Empress is holding back that there is no medicine stone that can be cured. When I say something illegal, only when you come and speak, Empress will listen. I will ask you to advise her more later. I looked at this worried and innocent girl, her big eyes filled with pleading and trust, a look that made me sad and helpless. Both the Empress Dowager and Heng'er only saw the difference in how Sister Lingxi treated me. But only I know how bitter and hopeless my sister's heart is. Heart disease still requires a cardiologist. I am not my sister's heart disease, just someone who knows her heart disease. Seeing my sister again, even though I am mentally prepared, I cannot help but feel sad. No wonder Heng'er was so anxious that she was about to shed tears. In just over 10 days, her sister had already lost a whole circle of weight. She was wearing a pear blossom blue light silk long dress, with only some tangled branches and green leaves on her snowy silk shirt, making her look even more thin and boneless. Her hair, which was 3 feet long, spread out and wrapped around the pointed hibiscus jade face. Moreover, with such a cold expression, apart from holding a gutong pipa in her hand, she was no different from a nun. I still remember that at that time, Lingxi's sister was only a child. She didn't want to play around with the third prince and Shuebua, so she ran to the place where the Empress Dowager was. She held her cheeks and quietly listened to the murmuring and elegant sounds emanating from her fingertips. Finally, she also picked up the pipa as if it were something. And I was practicing calligraphy with Consort Zhen on the side. Empress Dowager and Empress Dowager smiled and embroidered on the side, occasionally asking Aunt Hanhua to make some pastries and urging everyone to take a break. Memories are vivid in my mind, and compared to this sister's eyes, my heart is filled with sorrow, so sour that I almost shed tears. Sister Lingxi originally thought she was like an old monk who had settled down, but then she spoke up and said, "You're all right, why do you look like you're about to cry? Isn't it enough for me to have Heng'er wiping tears all day long?" I could only say, I am indeed in good condition, but my sister is not. Before the autumn breeze arrives, she is thinner than Huang Hua. Whether it is Huai Shu or Heng'er, how can she not be sad? Lingxi smiled bitterly and shook his head before asking for a moment, "I haven't seen you these days. I heard that Empress Dowager Cheng has fallen ill. Is it clear that she has recovered?" "All right, everyone is good, only you, sister, are not good." I finally put down the words that reached my lips and just said, "How did you know, sister? Although you are here, your heart is bound by the personnel in Zio City. Why bother yourself? In this world, there are no bonds. My mother confined me here just to force me to cut off the original bonds in my heart." At this moment, Heng'er came in carrying tea and said, "Empress Ji, please have some tea." I just remembered and quickly waved to Rushio, saying, "Give the things to Miss Heng quickly." Turning around, he said to his sister, "I just got some high-quality rainbow dragon well the day before yesterday. I remember my sister used to like it the most. Tell them to change it quickly. Lingxi let out an and said, it's hard to save for you. I haven't finished drinking it yet. I knew she misunderstood that I took Longjing from last year. She has been pampering herself since childhood, and I can't hide the new and old tea leaves from her. So I just told her the truth and said, Sister, this wasn't saved last year, but was recently appreciated by the Empress Dowager herself. Lingxi was taken aback for a moment and slowly put down the blue porcelain teacup with 100 flowers intertwined with branches in his hand. He said, before the rain, Longjing still respected Suzhou and Hangzhou, which are nearly 1,000 miles away from the capital. At this time, the first batch of urgent tribute from the Weaving Bureau must have been sent. Mother. In the original work, Lingxi will never marry in the novel, and this will change. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Snow Soul. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Snow Soul. I know she already understood and couldn't help but advise, Sister, pity the hearts of parents all over the world. Sister is becoming increasingly thin, but I don't know that the Empress Dowager is also having trouble sleeping and eating. To be honest, the Empress Dowager has not only brought these, but also a batch of high-quality blood swallows. Has my younger sister forgotten who banned me here? The Empress Dowager has always had an iron fist. Originally, she just wanted to kill her sister's aura so that you could surrender obediently. However, as the mother and daughter are connected, she doesn't feel any pain from seeing you like this. It's just that now, as the Empress Dowager, she is still the queen and can't bring herself down. So, I have to go this trip. The spring breeze outside the hall caressed the bamboo, leaving only the rustling sound of bamboo leaves. I saw that my sister had no intention of answering, and I was thinking about finding a way to avoid embarrassment. But without any warning, there was a sound of the collision of the rings, as clear as the laughter of a young girl. Lingxi and I exchanged a glance, both puzzled. Just as we were about to order someone to go out and take a look, a voice came. Lingxi sister, it's me. The newcomer is a young girl of 12 or 13 years old, with an extremely tall stature, fair skin, a head tied in a double flat bun, and a white jade inlaid coral bead rui hairpin inserted on each side, which is suitable for the graceful and elegant cloisonne earrings. A pink-purple floral branch skirt paired with the same colored golden thread begonia draped silk. She appears noble and dare not be forced to look at, bright and stunning beyond measure. Lingxi was delighted to see his younger sister and smiled lightly, saying, Qianyu, why did you come? Xuepo's nickname was Qianyu. Upon hearing this, she flattened her lips, as if she was filled with infinite grievances, and said, My birthday is coming soon. If my sister doesn't come to see me, I'll have to come to see her. I was afraid that Xuepo's childlike words would be shameless, so I quickly joked and said, Look, since I entered the house, I've only been treated as nothing. Then I won't go to your birthday next time, so you won't be bullying and treating you well. Xueli hurriedly said. Where did Sister Six go? I just knew you were here, so I came here in a hurry. Otherwise, sisters would get together and get when. I said. You too. Sister Lingxi doesn't like to be busy with vegetarianism. Let's laugh and go for a while, and she will only be more lonely. It should be I come today, you come tomorrow, and call 3 brothers the day after tomorrow. Let's make sister not be too busy and not too cold. Xuepo's young face was tender, and he couldn't refute me. He paused with his left foot and said in a slight annoyance, My mother said to me, Sister Lu, that you have a gentle and refined heart. She asked me to learn more from you, which shows that I have never seen you speak so eloquently before. I was shocked when I heard this, but it was just a joke between ordinary sisters. If the little girl Xueli accidentally revealed her words to the Empress Dowager, she would think that we are different from the past and the future. How can we cause future trouble? Although she may not be such a narrow-minded person, since my father passed away, my fate can be said to be controlled by her and I cannot make any mistakes. Lingxi pretended to be angry and said, "You are the youngest daughter. Do you only allow your elder brothers and sisters to hurt and protect you, and don't you want to make fun of you?" She pointed to the brocade box held in her maid's beaded hand and said, "What is that? Don't eat anything. Your sister Huaishu just brought a pile, and I can't bear it anymore." Shuepa suddenly remembered and patted his head. He quickly took the brocade box and opened it, saying, "Lian Biao from the Ministry of Internal Affairs is really careful. It's not like he's about to draft soon. He's preparing clothes, but there isn't enough jewelry and utensils, so he even begged for a lottery, saying it's for the time of the future empress and young masters. I found it interesting, so I brought some to play with." At this moment, even Lingxi couldn't help but smile and say, "I wonder what kind of novelty this is. Women from all dynasties have loved to play with it, but it's just a slap in the face without taking it seriously. No one can stop making fun of it." Upon hearing this, Shuepa became even more proud and said, "You don't know, this time they were all produced in the same batch, and even the signatures were sung by the famous Hua Shi in the capital." Lingxi and I were both surprised and said, "What are you saying?" This Huashi guest is the top official of the famous fireworks venue in the capital, Love Wind Tower. The scholars of the great Zhou dynasty were fond of elegance and never avoided having sex with prostitutes. However, if prostitutes were blindly vulgar and ruthlessly flirtatious, it would be uninteresting. So gradually, there emerged a type of Qinghu people who only performed and danced without receiving guests. These women were generally well-educated, not only playing lyrics and singing music, but also composing poetry and prose, all of which did not fall behind. In recent years, a woman from Sichuan has arrived in the capital, who is said to have a closed moon and shy face, and is the talent of Yan Rui and Xue Tao. In short, it was a mess of being sought after, and many princes and grandchildren flocked to it. These are all just gossip from when the Queen Qi entered the palace. As for her nickname, it seems to have been derived from the phrase, "falling red with flowing water, tears like a stream of flowers." Although women in the capital can secretly learn the attire of Huashi guests, as imperial concubines, we are a model for women in the world. Every word and action should never have any connection with a dusty woman. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a huge joke? So I hurriedly said, "Sister, you didn't say anything today. Hurry up and return these things. It's all because Xiao Lianzi is so bold and has nothing to do with you." Shuepa didn't care at all and said, "Sister Lu, don't worry. Since I dare to invite you to play with me, I naturally agreed with my mother. Sister Lingxi, my mother really cares about you. In order to make you come out, she didn't care how many taboos she made. This girl always spares no effort in bridging the gap between her mother and sister, but her sudden words make it difficult for people to communicate. So I had to say, Mother really agrees, do you play with these things that have been passed down in fireworks places?" Shuepa was dissatisfied and said, "Does Sister Lu suspect me? When Lian Biao went to answer today, I happened to be there. I heard that he ordered the Bureau of Works to produce flower swabs for the future concubines to play with. My mother was very moved and talked about the time she played with Empress Dowager Duan Gui and Empress Chunmin. I was so curious that I brought it over to see her." Unexpectedly, Harmony also came to pay her respects. She was a troublemaker, and I kindly introduced her to her. Who would have thought she would have a stern face and say that this was played by an unclean woman? Isn't this a slap in the face of me and Empress Dowager? Lingxi frowned and said, "Nonsense, she's our sister. How could you behave like this?" Shuepa said wrongly, "Thank you for treating her like a sister. I was young at the time. How did the Hu family frame the Empress Dowager and almost incite the father to depose her position? Didn't my sister witness it firsthand?" Lingxi said, "The deceased is already dead. Sister Harmony is actually the flesh and blood of her father, and she is innocent. But she just hates it. She's always acting strange. Empress Dowager Zheni is clearly her foster mother, and she loves and shows her great compassion. Look at her, she is half filial. Even Empress Dowager Huaishu said that treating her harmoniously is not as courteous and filial as Sister Huaishu. Shuepa paused and said, that day Empress Dowager was also angry. She asked her, since it's obscene language and music in the fireworks scene, how do you, as Empress Dowager, know? She actually said it was said by third brother, and hinted that third brother's behavior was not good. Empress Dowager became angry, saying that as a child, she didn't know filial piety. Respectfully, she is not a female worker and only goes to inquire about right and wrong. If she gets married in the future, she will definitely make a fool of herself. Ask her to return to the Wuliang Palace for half a month of contemplation. After hearing this, I didn't think so. In the past, the Hu family was favored by their father and was arrogant and domineering. She was displeased that Empress Dowager Zhen refused to bow down to her, and that Empress Dowager Zhen, who had always been diligent in walking with her and also favored by her father, was publicly scolded and punished by her in the Jinxi palace. Even with the care of the Empress Dowager and several concubines in those years, our mother and daughter's lives were quite difficult. Until Hu's curse on the Empress Dowager failed, she was deposed as a talented person by her father and died suddenly. Harmony was also adopted by consort Zhenmu, but she has not yet vented her anger on her biological mother. On the contrary, she is a restless person from the past, just like what Snow's soul called strange energy. Over time, even a person as good-tempered as consort Zhen was so angry that she no longer cared about her moving out of the Sanshou palace. Shuepo's little temper comes and goes quickly. Seeing that neither Lingxi nor I refuted her, she stopped acting and turned to the boxwood bottle, saying, let's not talk about these things. If you don't draw, then don't draw. Let's take a look at these flower sticks. There can't be anything else, can there? Actually, I know that what girls want most is reputation, but as Sister Six said, drawing flower sticks has always been popular in ancient times. It's just that it has recently flourished in those Chu Guan Qin Lu, and literati and courtesans only called out flower stream sticks when they saw the unique signature of the flower stream guest. It's just a pouting head. Where is it as unbearable as Harmony said? In ancient times, daughters used to play with flower stickers, using flowers to symbolize people. This is just a gimmick. In addition, in the original work of Empresses in the Palace, there is no time limit for the dressing up of concubines, so I also use techniques invented by the Ming Dynasty such as cloisonné. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Past Events. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Past Events. We saw some truth in what Shuepa said, and no longer resisted like we did just now. We followed her. In fact, women of our age do love these delicate things. Everyone has a common understanding and takes them to play with. What I picked up first was a wooden hibiscus flower stick, perhaps because it was the king of flowers in Sichuan. It was made exceptionally beautifully, and I haven't come to carefully read the poems in the stick yet. Seeing Lingxi also casually taking a note, she looked up and slowly read aloud. In the lonely courtyard, spring is about to arrive late, and the pear blossoms cover the ground without opening the door. It is also appropriate to sing about the pear blossoms. Shuebwa and I both changed our faces at the same time. This was a curse and prophecy on our sister's fate, no matter how unlucky it was. Sure enough, Shuepa flicked the bamboo stick and held Lingxi's hand, coquettishly saying, "Sister, this is just for fun, I can't count on it. You come draw one, there must be a good start this time." Lingxi impatiently said, "Heaven's will is like this, there's no need to force it. Besides, what you just said is not worth taking a look. If you want to play, you can continue with Huai Shu. Otherwise, you can go back and accompany your mother." Shuepa wanted to say more, but I quietly tugged at her clothes under the table to stop her. Lingxi's temperament may seem gentle, but it's useless to be stubborn. Otherwise, how could she be softened here by her biological mother? The Empress Dowager. In the inner hall, there was a momentary stalemate. In a daze, my thoughts drifted back to the chaotic afternoon after the new year. Time division line. On that day, she was still in the 7th year of the reign of Empress Dowager Su. It was unlucky for her to die at a young age. Although the Empress Dowager ordered her to be buried as Empress Dowager, there were only a few people behind her who went to pay homage to Ji Shouling. The Empress Dowager was the softest in her heart, and she thought it would be a love affair to enter the palace together. She couldn't bear to see her desolate journey, and disregarded the cold weather and the long distance. She went day by day to guard the Zigong Palace for Empress Dowager Su. I don't trust that my mother will naturally accompany me. Ru Wan went out to pass on the warm sedan chair, but when she returned, her face was full of suspicion. My mother has always been careful and said calmly, is it because the servants of the Ministry of Internal Affairs are too cold to refuse? Forget it, let's walk over there. Ru Wan hurriedly said, the Empress Dowager is too worried. The servants are waiting outside. However, when the servant just came in, the maid from the Chonghua Hall was probing her head. The servant looked strange and walked over to ask. Unexpectedly, the girl was stuttering and started saying she wanted to find the Empress Dowager, but immediately changed her mind and left. The servant couldn't resist questioning, it was strange. Rujuan was only in her early 20s, but her mother saw that she was rare in stability and wit. After Aunt Bishi left the palace to marry, she was promoted to be the palace maid in charge of Ningshou Palace. I was also surprised to see her say this. Chonghua Hall is the residence of Lingxi's sister, separated from Xuepa's Fanghua Hall on both sides of Yining Palace. Sister often asks me to go play, but why should I let the maid stutter like this? It's really strange. I asked, who is that palace maid, but is it Henger? Rujuan said, no, Henger, I recognize her. It was the last time I saw Emperor Ji back. My mother patted my hand and said, if you're not at ease, just go and take a look. My mother can accompany Han Ji to talk. I thought about it and said, then let Rujuan accompany you first. Tomorrow, my son will go and pay respects to my mother. After that, I took Ruxiu out, but fortunately the journey was not far. But before I arrived at the Chonghua Hall, I saw the Lingxi combing palace maid pacing back and forth with a blush, as if she hadn't seen me. Ru Xiu shouted, dare, don't you salute when you see Emperor Huaishu's concubine. Lu Hong startled and quickly knelt down to pay homage. I said straightforwardly, what are you doing here if you don't take good care of your sister? You just came to my palace, what the hell is going on? Lu Hong became anxious and said, Empress Dowager, there's an accident. Our Empress Dowager. I saw that she was not careful, so I quickly stopped drinking and said to Ruxiu, you stay on the side. Then I called Lu Hong to a pine tree and said, it's safer here, you can talk. Today, Henger received news that the eldest grandson of Marquis Shen, the governor of Jeju, had entered the capital and was approved by the Empress Dowager to come and discuss marriage. I suddenly understood something. The grandson of the Marquis Jing and family, also known as the legitimate nephew of Empress Dowager Xian Zhaohui, the legendary Qilu Junjie, had already made a marriage agreement with Emperor Lingxi Ji. Seeing that my sister has also grown up, are you coming to ask for marriage? Lu Hong said again, our Empress Dowager was unhappy and helpless after learning about it. Just now, I couldn't hold back and ordered my servant to invite you, but as soon as I left the Chonghua Hall, the Empress Dowager's ceremonial guard arrived at the back. That's why I don't know what to do. The Empress Dowager arrived, and I suddenly felt a bit uneasy. Unfortunately, Lu Hong didn't even bother to ask, Empress, what are we doing now? I was feeling annoyed and said, you ask me, I ask who? I don't even know what's going on inside now, and I don't know how to calculate. What can I do? Lu Hong saw me angry and quickly knelt down to admit my mistake. I was extremely annoyed and didn't pay attention to her for a moment. Instead, she thought of something and hesitated, saying, if Emperor Ji really wants to know about the situation inside the palace, I have a way. Although it's risky, maybe we can give it a try. I looked at her suspiciously, blushing as I remained silent. I bit my lips and said, there used to be a weak area in the west corner, which was supposed to be repaired by the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Later, Emperor Ji raised a small curly hair and had the supervisor dig a hole. Emperor Ji is petite and should be able to. I suddenly understood and angrily said, do you want me to go drill a dog hole? Lu Hong quickly knelt down and timidly said, Emperor. Emperor Ji, calm down. That has long been abandoned, not to mention. More importantly, the place is desolate and no one will notice it. I hate it so much that I almost didn't go up and kick her. I really want to thank my birth mother and several concubines for teaching me the virtues of women over the years, which made me resist the idea of being impolite. This influencer is really reckless. I don't understand why my sister values her so much. I suppressed my pressure and said in a calm tone as much as possible, don't bring up such absurd thoughts anymore. I just can get in, so what? Can you stop the Empress Dowager's decision? Let's wait here for now. Upon hearing this, Lu Hong immediately said, Emperor Ji refuses to step in, but I must go back and accompany our Emperor Ji. After kowtowing, she didn't run away. I didn't expect her to be so decisive, and even in a slight daze, I couldn't help but feel a bit embarrassed. Even a young palace maid is like this. Zipe, how did your Lingxi sister treat you since childhood? She is as close as her legitimate younger sister, and even told you the most secret emotions in her heart. Can you feel at ease to stay out of this situation? Thinking this way, my heart became increasingly restless, as the cold wind howled and the knife cut through my cheek. Let my mind move forward even more. At that time, Lady Zhuang Min was in high spirits and deliberately made things difficult for her mother to pray all night in the Tongming Hall. When I went to bed at night, I couldn't find my mother and was so anxious that I could only cry. However, the palace people were afraid of Lady Zhuang Min, so no one dared to take me to find her. I was unwilling and slipped out on my own while they were not paying attention. But when I left the heart hospital, I didn't even know the way. The road was slippery in the dark, and the wind howled, as if a ghost was holding back its tears. I was both panicked and scared, so I could only search for the light, stumbling along the way, stuttering and answering. The sound of people approaching in the distance, the palace lamps curling up, indicating that someone is moving forward. I was truly shocked and exhausted, and regardless of who came, I shouted at the top of my throat, come on, woo-woo. Then an internal supervisor came to visit and saw me, so he carried me to the center of the crowd. It turned out that Sister Lingxi was traveling in a soft sedan chair. The people around me asked me incessantly that day, but now I can't remember it anymore. I only remember that Lingxi was wrapped in a large Xiaojun sleeve, took my hand, frowned, and said, my hands are so cold, they must have frozen. You and your sister are going to Yanxi Hall in a sedan chair, okay? We can just go pick you up, brother run. I stammered, but I need to go to the Tongming Palace to find my mother. Lingxi smiled and said, runner loves Huai Shu the most. She will definitely plead with Madame Zhuang Min, Hu Yunrong. Then Empress Ying can go back with Huai Shu. I didn't know about those complicated relationships at that time, I just panicked and responded. Lingxi then led me into the sedan chair, afraid that I would be cold. He untied his Xiaojun suit and wrapped me in it, his spacious robe filled with warmth. Just like the warmth brought to me by Sister Lingxi, it has not dissipated for so many years. This is a set of memories. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Mother-daughter clash. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Mother-daughter clash. The further I think about it, the more I can't bear to stay out of it. As I gritted my silver teeth, I finally searched for the footprints that had faded away, and finally discovered the legendary small door. It was really a cluttered, dirty and messy territory that I didn't even want to take a second look at. But precisely because of this, it is really not easy to be discovered. I took a deep breath and crouched down to try, feeling a bit forced. So I untied my emerald white brocade cloak and threw it aside. I struggled to resist my stomach and crawled in. Fortunately, I often come to the Langhua Hall on weekdays. Perhaps I can find a place without anyone to guide me, or maybe I don't want to speak up. The Empress Dowager didn't bring many people, only guarded a few entrances. I quietly and slowly avoided the sight of the palace people, and quietly passed to the second gate. Further inside, there was the main hall, and the manpower was bound to increase. But considering that since the person has already entered, we must find a way to feel the situation and then make calculations. But before I could touch the main hall, I heard Aunt Huai scold, "Dare, didn't the Empress Dowager order all the servants to go out? What are you sneaking around here for?" The next voice became even more familiar, "Servant, servant." Hua Yi became even more stern and said aggressively, "Did you turn a deaf ear to the Empress Dowager's words, or was there someone who instructed you to confess as soon as possible? Otherwise, you will be sent to the Xinxing Sea." Lu Hong, this heartless and unlucky person, is really speechless. You are more clever at sneaking peeks and being a thief. At this moment, I had no choice but to flash out and say, "Auntie, wait a moment. She's going to call me." As I quickly drafted in my heart, if Hua Yi asks me how I got in, what should I say? And why has she followed Auntie Jinxi for many years? It shouldn't be easy to fool her, right? But Hua Yi only had time to shout, "Empress, what's wrong with you?" Immediately after, a scream similar to Jinxi's echoed through the room, "Empress, what's wrong with you?" Upon hearing this, Lu Hong lost her voice and said, "Emperor Ji." After speaking, she stood up regardless of everything and rushed in. To Hua Yi's surprise, she was so stunned that she couldn't stop drinking for a moment. Lu Hong hurriedly pushed open the door, and the scene was clearly visible and shocking. Lingxi's sister's jade face twisted, tightly gripping this sharp blade of scissors in her right hand, frantically cutting her own shiny black hair. Aunt Jinxi desperately pulled and stopped her. Lu Hong was shocked and went straight to grab the scissors. But sharp tools have no eyes, and none of them dare to exert great force to avoid hurting the irrational Lingxi. At this moment, the Empress Dowager said sternly, "Don't stop me, let her cut." Upon hearing this, Sister Lingxi was slightly stunned and her movements couldn't help but become full. Speaking late, at that moment, the Empress Dowager raised her hand and slapped her in the face. She exerted great strength, wearing a gold cloison A armor in her hand. Her sharp face showed several clear bloodstains, and the corners of her mouth turned red. Lingxi's face was deflected to one side by the blow, and her eyes were still empty and lifeless, as if there was no hope for the drowning person to die. However, as soon as she arrived, her red lips lifted lightly, with a mournful meaning. "Mother, the marriage was arranged by you, and my daughter has never agreed. Besides, how can I think of one person while sleeping with another?" The Empress Dowager glanced slightly. Although she was over 40 years old, her makeup was delicate on a daily basis, and she looked at her with the same age and glory as my mother's consort. But today, perhaps under anger, a sense of pain gradually appeared on his face. Paired with the lotus blue embroidered silk robe he was wearing today, it looked like the ruined autumn lotus in the Taihe pool, which looked very frightening. It seemed like for a moment, she laughed heartily, that kind of smile made me shiver, and I lowered my head and dared not look again. I heard her say again, "What can't we just live our lives? Just consider ourselves dead, what can't we do? Why can't we?" Auntie Jinxi was deeply saddened by the words, and tears welled up in her eyes. However, she didn't say a word, and for a moment, there was a deathly silence in the hall. This situation is a bit awkward. If I could choose, I would only hate myself for being transparent. But the reality is that since I bumped into her in person, I had no choice but to walk in boldly and kneel at the feet of the Empress Dowager, bowing in an appropriate manner, saying, "My mother is blessed with peace and prosperity." The Empress Dowager seemed to have not heard what I said, standing proudly on the side, as if the others had not heard it. Auntie Jinxi touched a tear and walked up to Sister Lingxi, kowtowing, Empress Dowager, I beg you to follow the Empress Dowager's orders and lower Prince Shen. You are the flesh and blood of the Empress Dowager, and she will definitely choose a son.in.law for you. Sister Lingxi felt as if her strength had been drained from her body, relying on her flushed body to prevent her from collapsing. She looked at Jinxi, who was pleading with white hair on her temples, and after a while, she smiled bitterly, but I don't have him in my heart. Even if he's the best candidate, what's the difference? The Empress Dowager's expression moved slightly, but soon it turned into a cold expression. She sneered and said, then tell me, who is in your heart? Tell me. Sister Lingxi was momentarily speechless, and her gaze towards her mother became uncertain and uncertain. My face turned pale with fear. Did the Empress Dowager know? No, it's impossible. I didn't say it, Sister Lingxi wouldn't say it. As for Lu Hong, she is loyal to her sister and wouldn't say it. How could the Empress Dowager know such a private matter? Is it really the legendary bond between flesh and bone? She wouldn't be willing to force Lingxi like this. The Empress Dowager seemed to have foreseen such a reaction. Her experienced eyes were as sharp as eagles and falcons, and she aimed at her own daughter. In a deep voice, she said, since you can't say it, the AI family is not interested in asking questions. Anyway, with your current health, it's not appropriate to get married. Humph, you don't want to get married, but the AI family doesn't want to form enemies, which has not ruined my half-life relationship with Sister Mei. Jinxi. She turned around and shouted, go and pass on the AI family's decree. Emperor Lingxi Ji will go to the Feishuang palace to recuperate soon. When will this heart be sick? No, when will I figure it out and come see the AI family again? Memories come to an end. As Xuepe continued to speak, I secretly signaled to her not to speak for now. Then he picked up the bamboo stick that had been thrown aside by Xuepe, flipped it around and smiled with satisfaction, saying, there's no need to reselect it. There's still a signed document behind it, well, it's not bad either. Lingxi couldn't react for a moment, and Xuepe hurriedly said, what do you mean? Without waiting for me to answer, he pulled it over and instantly understood. He showed his face like spring flowers and smiled, saying, sure enough. Sister's beauty should be complemented by the advice of pear blossoms, ice, and snow. Her Lingxi was also curious when she said this. She took the bamboo skewer and moved her eyebrows slightly. Sun Yan said, ice and snow, I often think about the Qingming Road of Nanjing. My drunken sleeve branches against the wind and snow. Xuepe smiled and clapped his hands, saying, well, this is from Lu Yu's Pear Blossoms. In fact, the first two lines are even more wonderful. It's a family with a light pink fragrance, not filled with peach and plum blossoms. Lingxi smiled slightly and said, your poetry is quite fluent, indicating that you haven't been slacking off recently. A large stone fell to the ground in Xuepe's heart, and he explained with a happy smile for half a day. Lingxi saw that she couldn't hold back, so she said, don't drop the backpack there anymore. Sister Huaishu still has it in her hand. Xuepe stuck out his tongue and leaned closer to me, looking at the bamboo stick. Curiously, he said, it's an unknown red flower, but it's also beautiful and charming. He also looked at the sign that read, ice is bright and jade is natural, and it's a desolate combination of the west wind guest. She refuses to marry the east wind, but is diligent in the frost and dew. The signature was Lingxi Xianpin before he said, so it's Mulian, which is quite common in Sichuan. I laughed and said, it's really a joke. I don't even recognize what kind of flower this is, but I have to trouble Xuepe to recognize one or two for me. Xuepe didn't recognize this flower just now, and felt a bit embarrassed when she heard it. However, when it came to poetry, she did have a strong maternal style. When she heard that she had the opportunity to showcase it, she quickly leaned over and said, congratulations, Sister Lu. This wood hibiscus, also known as mulyan, or a frost-resistant flower or a lotus bud. It flourished during the Tang and Song dynasties and became the king of Sichuan and Sichuan flowers. During the 5 dynasties, the ruler Meng Chang used this flower as a metaphor for the beauty of his beloved consort, Lady Su Hui, whose flower buds were planted everywhere in Chengdu. After a pause, she said, "Those Sichuan singers all use this as their leader, and those who win the lottery are respected. Of course, we won't learn these anymore, but Sister Lu always has good luck. Mu Furong blooms in late autumn and is not afraid of the cold frost and east wind. Her character is very admirable." I smiled bitterly upon hearing this. Although I didn't read as much as Snow Soul, I also knew that this flower had a name. Heartbreaking grass. Once the hibiscus flower, now it is the broken intestine grass. How long will it last to serve others with beauty? The flower swabs of the 3 imperial concubines do not necessarily predict their fate. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Empress Dowager Duan Gui. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Empress Dowager Duan Gui. People use flowers as a metaphor for beauty, but 100 people have 100 stomachs. The character of each flower is both good and bad, depending on the person. The Huashi guest must be well versed in this art. Although it is the same pear blossom pile of snow, it is both lonely and helpless, but also icy and snowy. No matter how it is said, it is all good. Sister Jinxi seemed to see something on my mind and said softly, "Last year when I visited my aunt at the prince's mansion in Pingyang, I saw this kind of flower in the flower garden. It is a first grade, 3-drunk hibiscus, with different colors in the morning, middle, and evening. It looks like a beautiful woman is drunk, so it's named. This flower is like our son's pendant, very suitable." Shui Bol said, "I have forgotten Sister Huaishu's maiden name, King Kingzi Pei. It's so thought-provoking. By the way, sister, was your name obtained by Empress Dowager Da?" I said, "No, it was my mother who obtained it." Shuepa surprisingly wrote something unbelievable, and I suddenly understood that she felt a little upset because she didn't think her mother's studies were too much. Almost jokingly, he said, "All right, it's your turn. Your icy and snowy spirit has been drained by Sister Wu. Let's see how lucky you are now." Actually, neither Sister Jinxi nor I can be considered to have really drawn a lottery. After all, it was not done by ourselves. But when we arrived at Shuepa's place, judging from her enthusiastic appearance, we would not compare ourselves to this. Shuepa was obviously very attentive, holding the bottle of boxwood and shaking it again and again. After carefully selecting a branch, he showed a hint of disappointment on his small face and said, "It turned out to be tea leaves. I was hoping it was Shifu begonia." I laughed and said, "If you really want something, let's play something else. Read it and listen." Shui Baofeng said, "The signature is from the Peak of Youth, followed by. When it's time for the tea in spring season, the slightest hint leaves the berry wall." Sister Jinxi was originally smiling, but her face changed slightly when she heard the words, "Youth is in its prime." With the words, "Spring is coming," on her face, she even twitched her lips and quickly asked, "Is there anything left behind?" Shuepa flipped over and said, "No problem." Then he flipped over and said strangely, "Not to mention, with so many lots, only pear blossom is a double-sided lot." After a pause, he smiled and said, "You can see that sister is a hidden willow and a bright flower. Don't use dong tian when you hit." Linxi's expression was a bit strange, but in the end, he only let out a shallow sigh and did not continue the topic. Allow Shuepa to talk endlessly about various interesting things that their cousin Zhen Suling recently mentioned in her letter. After all this fuss until dinner time, Shuepa and I saw that Jinxi was extremely tired before bidding farewell together. But in fact, Ying Palace and Ningshou Palace are not on the same road, so as soon as we leave the fence, we have to separate. But when we both came, we walked slowly on foot, but after playing for a day and then walking back, we felt a bit guilty. So we ordered someone to summon the Ting sedan chair to carry it. Taking advantage of the short gap before parting, Shuepa confidently said, "I told you, how could my sister really live a lifetime of Qingdang ancient Buddha? It's all those heartless and despicable servants with broken mouths. Sixth sister, let's come and play with Lingxi's sister more in the future, and we will always make her return to the world." Looking at her happy face, I don't know what to say. I certainly hope for Lingxi to be good, but I feel uneasy in my heart. Why not be down to earth, but I can't explain clearly. I just feel that many things are not that simple. However, I didn't expect that something unexpected happened quickly, and the situation was not something that could be described simply. Of course, this is a later part. As it was a sedan chair, the attendants chose a flatter road. The rattan sedan swayed and led me around an intersection, revealing a sea of colorful flowers with intricate patterns. It was said to be a sea of flowers, but in reality, it was a colorful sunset. Being blown by the wind, some fell to the ground and twirled a few times, while others took advantage of the wind and landed on people, but none of them. I picked up a peach blossom petal floating in my hand and realized it was already April. The ultimate reason left for me this spring is the sedan chair, and the attendants chose a flatter road. The rattan sedan swayed and led me around an intersection, revealing a sea of colorful flowers with intricate patterns. It was said to be a sea of flowers, but in reality, it was a colorful sunset. Impression is the serene falling flowers. On the 6th day of the 4th month in the 8th year of the Zhengzhang reign, a sacred decree was announced to the world through the Ministry of Rites. In my opinion, this lengthy sentence can be summarized. I will choose a few concubines and extend my descendants. Soon, it will be the Empress Dowager's birthday celebration. As it is not the 10th birthday, the Empress Dowager intends to simplify the handling of the Internal Affairs Department, and all the money saved will be spent on the decoration of this talent show. However, the imperial brother firmly refused and said, "I rule the world with filial piety, and I prioritize women over women." But because the Empress Dowager insisted, this birthday banquet was not a big one. On the other hand, the Empresses Dowagers gathered together to gossip, saying that the Empress Dowager is blessed and that their adopted sons are more filial than their own. Yes, today is not the biological flesh and blood of the Empress Dowager. In the past, Empress Dowager Zhaohui had a difficult childbirth and passed away. The young fourth prince, Yuruan, was raised by Empress Dowager Zhaohui's consort Zhen Huan, who was then favored by the 6 palaces and entrusted with a handkerchief by Empress Dowager Zhaohui. Although Lady Shu has already had a son and 2 daughters by her side, she shows great care for her imperial brother, even more so than her own. Afterwards, the imperial brother ascended to the throne and immediately conferred the title of Empress Dowager on his adoptive mother. At that time, many senior officials suggested that Zhen Shi was not the current biological mother, nor was she a legitimate member of the late emperor's family, and should not hold the position of Empress Dowager. But the 8-year-old brother is very persistent about this. For 8 years now, in an instant, the 2 palaces are still harmonious. On the contrary, the 3rd prince of the Empress Dowager, who has already adopted the Qinghe lineage, is becoming more and more like his adoptive father, the Prince of Qinghe. He travels through the mountains and rivers, rarely returns to the palace, and not even looks like a luxurious nobleman. Clearly, he is a great young master of the turbid world. In the blink of an eye, it was April 12th, when the Empress Dowager was celebrating her birthday. Her elder brother held a banquet at the Lingshao Terrace, and a group of Empresses Dowager, Crown Prince, and Empress Dowager gathered here to congratulate her on her eternal succession in the age of the crane. That day I went with Lady Duan. Lady Duan has been in poor health and has been bedridden from time to time. Every winter, it's particularly difficult to endure the scorching cold. Fortunately, the weather is warm now, and she is still in good spirits. Otherwise, she wouldn't ask me to come to her often. In fact, I am also closer to Empress Dowager in my heart, because Empress Dowager may have been ill for a long time and always treats people coldly. Unlike Empress Dowager who treats me affectionately. But the Empress Dowager always said, Empress Dowager is the one who understands the most in the palace. She, like Empress Dowager loves you very much. It's just because of her nature that you're too young to understand. I really don't quite understand. The Qian Yuan dynasty had already disappeared into time when I was 6 years old. Since then, I have lost my father and only my mother. My mother only has me, she gave me life, exhausted my time, and gave me all her love. What she said must be for my good. When we met again, Lady Duan was lying on the soft ground with a severe cough that made her pale face turn unhealthy. I quickly walked over and gently pounded her back, asking, Lady, are you taking medicine? After taking a breath, Empress Dowager Duan Gui shook her head weakly and said, No, these days there have been more willow fluff and flying fluff, and my qi disease has occurred. I said, the royal family has raised so many imperial doctors, are they all good to see there? Teach them to come and treat you. Empress Dowager Duan Gui smiled bitterly and said, the imperial doctors are not immortals. There is no divine ability to eradicate stubborn diseases. Besides, this is the root cause of my illness that fell early on. It's not good. After listening to it, my heart became increasingly uncomfortable and I didn't know how to start a conversation. Although I was born later, I also vaguely learned from the gossip of the elderly palace officials that the weakness of Consort Duan's mother was caused by being harmed in the early palace disputes. Presumably, every person who passed through the Qian and Yuan dynasties had some unknown hidden pain in their hearts. Empress Dowager Duan Gui is, Empress Dowager is, I believe she must be the same. At this moment, Aunt Rui brought the medicine and said, Empress Dowager is here. Hurry up and coax our Empress Dowager to take the medicine. I really can't feed it now. Empress Dowager frowned and said, this soup smells bitter from 8 miles away. After eating it for so many years, it's not good. It's better not to take it. I said, Empress Dowager is getting younger and younger. She's getting angry now and doesn't take medicine because she's afraid of hardship. She's not just like a child. Empress Dowager chuckled and said, it said that Huai Shu, you're quiet and regulated. Now that you're getting older, it's more irregular. I pursed my lips and said, I can't turn a tiger into a dog-like creature. If I can't learn from my mother, I'll call it Lady Duan's joke. Now it's not just Ruxiu behind me, even Lady Duan and Aunt Rui can't help but laugh. Taking advantage of everyone's happiness, I took the medicine from Rui's hand and jokingly coaxed the Empress Dowager to drink the medicine. But with such a delay, going back to change clothes and attend the banquet would be a bit rushed. Seeing that I was a bit anxious, Empress Dowager Duan said, I have also accumulated some auspicious clothes from Lian Yu's early years here. How about you make do with it and wear them first? I am also a bit indecisive in my heart. When I was still young, Sister Wen Yi had already surrendered to the governor of Yuzhang, Luoyikang. In my impression, she is calm and gentle, much like the temperament of a mother consort. As for her figure, I don't remember anything at all, but Empress Duan Gui is never someone who talks nonsense. I see that the weather is really not adventurous, so I have to thank Princess Duan Gui. Then I followed Aunt Jixiang into the inner room. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Empress Dowager Zhen Huan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Empress Dowager Zhen Huan. Because on that day, I only wore a pink plethora of folded branches and a Rui shirt with moon and white clouds patterns on the outside. The fit was too plain for a birthday banquet. Lady Duan sat on the side, watching the maid take out a neatly arranged stack of clothes and tenderly caress them. Sister Wen Yi married far away and often did not return after years. The Empress Dowager Duan Gui only has one adopted daughter, but she has been unable to see each other for a long time. She must have missed her so much in her daily life. With this in mind, Lady Duan Gui had already regained her senses and pulled out a floral cloud brocade woven gold palace dress. "Try this," he said after I put it on. I took a photo in the mirror and it didn't fit perfectly. "It really fits well. And go to the birthday banquet, so that the bright and light festive colors are very suitable for the occasion, without being too eye-catching and dominating." Taking advantage of this gap, Lady Duan also went to change clothes. She is the head of all the imperial concubines, and the Empress Dowager's birthday is also a happy occasion, so it's not good to be too plain. So her headband and tianyu carved lotus flower steps, and even the tassels hanging down are made of jade. The clothes are also silver red crane map palace attire. For the first time, I felt that Lady Duanmu was so beautiful. Even though she had already lost her beauty, her eyebrows and eyes were still handsome, so exquisite that I even felt a little jealous. I sighed and said, "Lady Duan, you are so beautiful." Duan Mufei was taken aback and then said, "This child, how old is Mufei? What else is there to see in an old lady?" But she was still happy. I said, "Time flies and no one can stop it, but what looks good is what looks good. If my son can still be like a mother at this age, he will be satisfied." Duan Mufei said calmly, "When you reach this age, let's talk about things at this age. Let's go, Zipei." The Lingxiao terrace rises from the ground, forming a sky. Looking from the platform, I could only see the vast purple Ao city in full view. I slowly stepped on the 27th level jade steps, holding on to the Empress Dowager. As if it were a lotus growing step by step, it truly entered the sky. "Stay at the table, Empress Dowager De, Empress Dowager Mother has already arrived." Uncle Wang and his wife from Pingyang have also sat upright, and everyone saw Empress Dowager Duan getting up to pay her respects. Empress Duan's qi was weak and she couldn't continue. With a slight gesture, she found a seat and sat down. I also approached Empress Duan. After a while, Consort Zhen and her second prince, Prince Jin, arrived together. Although Yu Pei was unmarried, he had already opened his teeth and built a mansion, and was usually not in the palace. Consort Zhen was very happy to see her son and kept talking with a smile in her mouth. After watching for a long time, Empress Dowager De suddenly sighed, "After the marriage of King Jin, I'm afraid Yan Yi will also be transferred to the royal palace, and the Changshou Palace and Shochi Palace may become even colder." The Empress Dowager poured her a glass of pear blossom white and said softly, "Sister, we should be happy for Sister Zhen. Besides, isn't the palace about to enter soon?" Empress Dowager 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 Wei Yuan and Lord Qingyi have arrived. Upon hearing this, Empress Dowager 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 Do. The lady around her, who is in her early 30s, looks very well maintained. They bowed together to Empress Dowager De, who declined and said, "Marquis and Lord Wang, please sit down quickly." They were the elder brother of Empress Dowager Zhenheng and her sister. In law, Chen Lord Qingyi was the legitimate granddaughter of Empress Dowager Zhaoqing, the former emperor. After getting married, she often interacted with palace concubines, so she was very familiar with Empress Dowager De and began to talk about family matters as soon as she sat down. After a while, an inner supervisor sang, "The Empress Dowager arrives, the emperor arrives." Everyone quickly stood up and knelt down, calling out to the mountain for 1,000 years. The Empress Dowager sat still, with a flat dialect. I just saw that the Empress Dowager was helped by her elder brother and a palace-dressed beauty, who, without looking, knew it was Yin Yuejing, who had just been promoted to Wani. The Empress Dowager was wearing a magnificent purple silk phoenix robe today, appearing extremely energetic. She looked around at the heads of the people and asked with a smile, "Who else hasn't arrived yet?" The elder brother respectfully replied, "Ling is sick." Big brother has already taken leave and is staying at home with his sister-in-law to take care of him. The Empress Dowager said with her head in her mouth, the prince and his wife of Qi have always been kind and have only one son. It is only natural for them to do so. Has the emperor sent someone to treat the crown prince? My son has ordered Dr. Meng Shixin from the imperial hospital to go. The Empress Dowager nodded in satisfaction and then asked, that's all for King Qi. Why didn't Han heir come? Shuepa quickly spoke up and said, Mother, third brother said he has prepared a big gift for you and will arrive later. This is a formal banquet, and the seating arrangement is determined by the etiquette. It is based on the snow soul sitting slightly away from the Empress Dowager, and it is based on the sound being loud and slightly abrupt. As expected, the Empress Dowager angrily said, just answer well, scumbags, there are no rules. The snow-white spirit in front of people dares not make mistakes, and they bow their heads and dare not speak. Upon seeing this, Marquis Weiyuan couldn't help but make amends and said, Empress Dowager, calm down. Empress Dowager Ji, at her age, being more lively is not a big deal. My young daughter, Su Ling, is about to go into the house and tear off the roof at home. The Empress Dowager naturally wouldn't argue with her own brother's face and instead said, Brother, you are humble. It's been a long time since the AI family saw the two children, Jiping and Suling. Why don't you bring them here today? Marquis Weiyuan said, Su Ling is stubborn. It's not good for me to call her here to disturb Holy Master. Jiping is already 13 years old, and the outer man has no position. He cannot enter unless summoned. The emperor smiled gently and said, Uncle is too cautious. Jiping is the only nephew of the Empress Dowager's family. He should have congratulated him on his birthday. He then turned to his inner supervisor and said, Wu Chongqing, don't go and send Prince Zhen in yet. It took a lot of time to come and go, and after the prince started, everyone presented congratulatory gifts. The Empress Dowager's dignity was the highest in the world, and it was not easy to find someone rare from her. Everyone is just looking for good luck. For example, Empress Dowager Duan Gui sent a handwritten copy of the Diamond Sutra, and her elder brother ordered someone to make an 8-leaf Nanmu screen embroidered with lifelike Shanglin 8 immortals, which began with the Empress Dowager's favorite crabapple. Naturally, it received a wave of praise. The Empress Dowager smiled and said, this child has ulterior motives. A few days ago, I said I was tired of staring at the moon shadow screen all day, and he even wrote it down for me. Aunt Jinxi also smiled and ordered the palace people behind her, hurry up and bring it back to the eating palace, so that the Empress Dowager can see the emperor's filial piety every day. The elder brother smiled and said, Auntie laughed at me again. I felt that when he laughed, he was gentle and pure, as if he was still the fourth brother who played with me when he was a child, not the lonely person on the dragon throne who was so affectionate in the world. Taking advantage of this harmonious atmosphere, I also offer a congratulatory gift, which is a quilt cover embroidered by me and my mother. Using Hangzhou silk as the base, embroider a red lotus pattern with fragrant thread. Actually, there's nothing new, it's just a way to win a lottery. But for some reason, when the Empress Dowager saw this embroidered piece, she was momentarily stunned, and her gaze was also gentle like water, spinning and giving me a meaningful glance. At such a plain glance, it actually makes me feel flustered and flustered. The Empress Dowager is truly a figure that I cannot measure. Although she has taken good care of me since childhood, being by her side always gives me a sense of oppression. She is as calm as water, but also profound and unpredictable. I don't know what can change your fate after the fact. This feeling became even stronger after Lingxi was sent to the Feishuang hall. Speaking of that day, despite all the panic, he didn't care about me. After all the fuss, he came back very late. My mother came back from the Tongming Palace to see me feeling restless, so naturally she was concerned and inquiring. But with such a big relationship, I dare not speak up, so I have to talk around and avoid it. The next morning, I heard that Duke Yun of Ying Palace had arrived and said he had something for me. I knew it must be related to the matter, but I never imagined that what came was the snow-fluff crimson veil cloak that I casually threw in the corner of the wall. I was so shocked that I couldn't even cover up and stuttered, "Well, how could you?" Duke Yun seemed very satisfied with my reaction and said, "Emperor Ji, there's no need to panic. She's a bold person from the Chonghua Hall who stole Emperor Ji's clothes and accessories. Lingxi Emperor Ji can't tolerate such a servant around her. Now that hoof has been sent, Emperor Ji can rest assured." I was even more confused by what he said, full of questions but not knowing how to speak. Upon seeing the situation, Duke Yun bowed and said, "I believe Empress Dowager must have been overly frightened. She should have taken a good rest, and I will not disturb her. I will leave first." There was no more follow-up on this matter, but it became a thorn in my heart. I couldn't say I couldn't pull it out, but I was more careful when facing the people and things in the palace, especially Empress Dowager Zhen Huan. Zhen Huan is considered a good legitimate mother, but she definitely treats her children better. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Harmony and Disharmony. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Harmony and Disharmony. But the Empress Dowager's attention immediately shifted away from me. Because someone sang, "The concubine of the Harmony Emperor has arrived at." Since the Hu family was deposed, they have been entrusted to the care of consort Wan Zhen for peace and happiness. Later on, during the funeral of the father emperor, there were gradually rumors of discord among the palace people. There were many legends that they were harmonious, as sharp and harsh as her biological mother, and disrespectful to her virtuous mother. But I know it's not all that. At that time, Empress Dowager Xin was still in the palace, and Empress Dowager Zhen and Empress Dowager Xin lived together in the same palace. Consort Zhen suffered from excessive grief and often cried day and night, making it difficult to swallow her food. Every time the Empress Dowager leads me to visit the Empress Dowager Zhen, she always says to the person who is guarding her harmoniously, "Good child, your Jin King brothers are not here. You should accompany the Empress Dowager well, you know." At that time, Harmony always obediently nodded and quietly escorted our mother and daughter out. Until one day, when I went to practice calligraphy with Consort Zhen, I heard a sharp and harmonious shout from a distance, which was unprecedented. "Consort Zhen, tell me how my biological mother passed away." The voice of Consort Zhen also echoed one after another, "What's wrong with you, child? Hu Kairen has a history of asthma and eventually died here. You don't know that." Sister Harmony became increasingly excited and said, "Do Consort Zhen treat me like a little doll? I heard everything you said to Aunt Kikyu yesterday. It was her, too, The following voice became hard to hear, as if Consort Zhen had covered her mouth and scolded her in a low voice. Although I didn't quite understand these words at that time, I also understood that I shouldn't let Princess Zhen know that I had listened to them. Slowly and softly slipped away. Because I didn't take it too seriously in my heart, I didn't even tell my mother when I went back. But within a few days, news came about Aunt Kikyu's marriage. It is not uncommon for palace maids to marry out of the palace with the grace of their master, but Kikyu was already over 30 years old, and everyone thought she would serve Princess Zhen in her old age. Moreover, despite her dignified status as a dowager, she hastily married out of town, showing a strong reluctance to keep up with her old age. Fu Taipin once chatted with his mother and said strangely, "This doesn't seem like Sister Yan Yi's style. Did Kikyu do something wrong?" The Empress Dowager also sighed, "Who would say it's not? But someone like Sister Yan Yi, who has a good personality, even if it's a bit scary, shouldn't be sent away like this." Suddenly, I remembered the sad and angry questioning of Harmony, and my heart seemed to understand a little. That night, full of doubts, I informed my mother about this matter. As I expected, her face changed, but she did not forget to remind me, "Père, forget about this matter and never bring it up to anyone else again." I certainly agree, but I am born with curiosity and always have a tendency to focus on secrets. I know the truth that trouble comes from the mouth. But my mother always keeps secrets in her belly, doesn't tell me, and doesn't allow me to talk about them anymore. Even though we are the closest people, can't we make an exception? Later, it wasn't until I became a mother that I understood the mother's hard work. She just did everything she could to make me live peacefully. She couldn't do the best, but she really put in her best effort. From then on, the reputation of Harmony gradually spread, and her meager mother-daughter relationship with consort Zhen was also exhausted in mutual suspicion and arguments. Gradually, the harmonious and genuine relationship became more and more aloof and unrestrained in the eyes of everyone, as the mother was absent and the foster mother did not love her. The Empress Dowager naturally became even more unhappy until she reached the age of 18 and did not make an engagement. Who in the palace would say, without secretly joking, "Old lady"? Today, I saw Empress Dowager Zhen supporting her son and coming happily. She only arrived late when the banquet had already begun and she claimed to be in Harmony and unable to come. I quietly glanced behind my mother, as if she was submerged in water, unable to tell her joy or anger. However, the Emperor has a somewhat uneasy expression. Today, Harmony is wearing a light-colored peony flower ground skirt with a bright red heart-saving bra and a smoky red armband on her arm. The whole person is like being held in a sea of flowers, and even I have to admit that I have never liked her. Her delicate features as a petite guest are as delicate as jade and ice sculptures. Compared to Sister Wen Yi's graceful demeanor, Sister Lingxi's pure appearance is equally beautiful. Only a snowy soul in bud can surpass 3 points. She walked Ying, still with a cold expression on her face, bowing under the throne. The Empress Dowager Mansion called her up and asked, "I heard from your mother that she didn't feel well when she came in. Why did she come here?" She said harmoniously, "Thank you very much for your care. It's because Empress Dowager Zhen has been worried too much, and Harmony has always been good." This was not a big deal, but when she spoke it out, it was somewhat awkward. The imperial brother asked, "Since the imperial sister has nothing to do, why did she come at this time? Did Wu Changqi not explain the time clearly?" He said harmoniously, "No, maybe the nobles feel that I have nothing to do with the ceremony and there is no one to notify me." After a pause, he said, "I live close to Ying. It was only through her driving that I found out today that the Emperor is celebrating the Empress Dowager's birthday. Speaking of which, even I can tell that it must be Princess Zhen who is afraid of causing trouble on her birthday, so she decided to keep it a secret and not let her participate. Harmony is something she may not even feel at ease with if you don't provoke her, let alone being exposed for nothing. It's strange not to act out." At this moment, Ying left her seat and bowed Ying, saying, "The Empress Dowager, calm down." It was because the Empress Dowager felt that the Empress Dowager did not live with her for a while and entrusted me to inform her. I am young and hastily forgot. Please punish me. The Empress Dowager scanned the crowd lightly, her gaze fixed on Ying, and said, "How can you betray the trust of Empress Dowager Zheni?" Ying simply said, "I understand my guilt." The crowd at the table looked coldly at me, even as naive as I, and understood that although the Empress Dowager's words sounded reproachful, they had already settled the matter. Many things in the palace are like this. You won't be wrong, I won't be wrong, but there must be someone wrong. When and who will make this mistake is the key. But unfortunately, some people didn't understand this and said coldly, "Wani doesn't need to be like this. There's no imperial concubine who takes care of the emperor's journey. I'm afraid someone will blame you for letting me know. From this matter, why do you have to take care of everything?" This taught Ying how to withstand it. At that time, I didn't know how to deal with myself. The Empress Dowager looked at Harmony and said with warmth, "I heard you say everything is okay." Originally, the AI family still had doubts, but now it looks good. Harmony, since you are in such good spirits and devoted to serving as a mother, the AI family cannot refute your intentions. I am shrouded in mist, just staring blankly. The Empress Dowager continued, "Emperor, I remember the rules of our ancestors. It's the first time the emperor has been selected since he ascended the throne, so I won't go to the palace in the summer, right? The imperial brother said, after returning to my mother, that's exactly what happened. The Empress Dowager said again, even so, we still need to take care of it. The Taiping Palace has always had rules, but we are not afraid. It's just that the place where strange beasts are raised in the Mingyuan has been a bit deserted since the late emperor returned to heaven. Harmony is so capable, why not share the worries of the AI family and go to the Mingyuan to take care of it? What is this? It has always been the responsibility of palace maids to manage royal gardens. Harmony can no longer be favored, but it is also the biological daughter of the late emperor. Moreover, Mingyuan cannot compare to Taiping Palace, as the summer heat is extremely hot and mosquitoes flock in. If it were to stay in the palace for a long time, it would be a painful experience, let alone listening to the Empress Dowager's instructions and not knowing when to return to the palace. This is an indescribable anxiety and embarrassment for a woman to be married. Even if Harmony is sharp, how dare one confront the Empress Dowager with force? I clearly saw her biting her lips tightly, maintaining her demeanor and thanking her. Lord Qingyi chuckled and said, the Empress Dowager is wise. Who wouldn't know that Empress Dowager Ji has been destined for Mingyuan since she was young, and she has caused Xiongbu to break the cage. In this way, it can be considered a return to fate. Her words were so harsh that even the Marquis of Weiyuan couldn't help but frown. But the elder brother said, all right, since the elder sister is going to the Mingyuan, let's go back and prepare earlier. Li Pancher from the Internal Affairs Office should hurry up and not mistreat the Empress. Sign up for comments, follow and reward. The concubine of the Harmony Emperor was once not angry with Empress Zhen Huan because of her mother Hu Yinrong's countless favors. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Prince Qi's Mansion, Signing and Changing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Prince Qi's Mansion, Signing and Changing. Brother Huang's move really surprised me. How could you really trample on Empress Dowager like this? Watching Harmony suffer all the humiliation and leave, my heart is filled with sorrow. The Empress Dowager covered her face with her sleeves and whispered, Harmony is a fault of her own. Don't be so soft-hearted that people can see it. Don't you know that when she caused trouble and angered Xiong, she almost killed the young emperor? Cheng Yi was just trying to prevent the emperor from becoming soft-hearted. Before I could answer, I heard the person outside say, Your Highness Qinghe, see you. I saw the third prince wearing a white silk shirt and deer leather boots. The face was covered in jade white, and the figure was handsome and dignified. Although he inherited the lineage of the sixth emperor, he was the mother and son of the Empress Dowager. Who dared to treat him as a collateral branch of the royal family? Before he could approach him, everyone stood up and saluted. The three brothers all arched their hands to answer. I have always had a great fondness for my third brother since I was young. Although he may have deviated from Beijing, he is actually very easygoing and does not give people a sense of oppression. When he walked over, I had intended to say something, but as soon as I saw who was following him, I lost interest. But when the Empress Dowager saw it, she was very happy and smiled, saying, Han Er, Ji Ping, why did you come together this time? Zhen Jiping was also dressed very spirited. He had always been favored by the Empress Dowager, so he felt at ease. He replied, I didn't get permission from my family to come and see the Empress Dowager. But when the Holy Spirit summoned me, I didn't dare to celebrate my birthday empty-handed. I was in a dilemma when I happened to meet my third cousin and three kings, so I borrowed his birthday gift and came together. The Empress Dowager smiled and said, What a great gift, it can bear the weight of two people. King Qinghe waved his hand and lifted the red cloth from the basket. He raised the basket high and said, The Empress Dowager's mother is a model, and nothing can match. I offer a peach to congratulate the Empress Dowager on her longevity. After that, he knelt down with King Qinghe and shouted for 1,000 years. The imperial brother was very interesting and said strangely, otherwise, third brother really stole the fairy peach of the queen mother. Shuepa said, brother, don't you just take a look and you'll know. With a sly smile on his face, I looked at her puzzled, but she just signaled for me to wait a moment. With a slight gesture from the imperial brother, Wu Changqing lifted the basket up. It was only then that I saw clearly that it was indeed a peach. But peaches have a rosy color and are very large, about the size of a palm. This is something I have never seen before, and everyone couldn't help but marvel. I couldn't help but ask, brother, where did you find this peach so big? Yuhan said gently, no wonder Huai Shu is strange. In fact, a year ago, when I saw this peach in the suburban manor, I was also startled. After asking the manor owner carefully, I found out that it was developed by a criminal official. Even if we choose more than 10 peach trees, they must be lush with branches and leaves. When the peaches are first ripe, peel off that ring for several months. These peaches will be incredibly large and look like immortals. My brother heard it interesting, so let him observe the tour carefully. There is indeed some truth, so I kept my mind. The imperial brother listened and asked, if you really have such a genius in agriculture, how could you become a criminal official? Just as Yuhan was about to speak, the Empress Dowager suddenly coughed and said, Han Heir's birthday gift is also appropriate, but it's too few, isn't it? Jiping said, there's a lot, Empress Dowager. The fruits and melons are seasonal. The ones picked now are fresh. After a pause, he smiled and said, I'm already drooling on the way. Please grant me a blessing. He is younger, and his jokes also appear sincere and lovely. Not only did Empress Dowager Guan err, but even Marquis Weiyuan did not speak out to reprimand. The Empress Dowager said, lucky longevity peaches, let's eat together. Empress Dowager smiled and said, the Empress Dowager's nephew is really likable. Now, at a young age, I have no choice but to become a young marquis, and my future prospects are limitless. As I listened, my heart was filled with anger and I blurted out, what's limitless? A man of great virtue should use his literary and martial arts skills to frame and support the country in the world. He will only flatter the emperor and cling to his skirt. It's not the style of a playboy. The Empress Dowager didn't listen well and whispered, you're being reckless, you're not going to be enchanted. I just realized that Empress Dowager Empress Zhen, and Second Prince were all looking at me in surprise. Realizing that the words were a bit sharp earlier, but the words had already been spoken, I decided not to think about them and drank xuanfu flower soup with my head down, not speaking. Only Shuepa said, this doesn't sound like what Sixth Sister said. But what she said was really enjoyable. She rubbed her left cheek, as if recalling, my cousin was so mischievous when he was a child, always making my sister cry. No wonder you hold grudges. I felt a little embarrassed and said, what kind of resentment? Don't talk nonsense. I'm so careful when I say it. Shuepa wanted to say more, but the palace attendant had already placed the longevity peach on her desk, and her gaze was taken away by the peach fruit. People like us are destined to live a luxurious life from birth, but on the other hand, we must follow the rules and regulations. Always setting an example for the people of the world. For example, in terms of food, although exquisite, many things we only know what they are in. I looked up and saw Brother Sanhuang chatting and laughing with everyone. Perhaps only he, who has been born since childhood, has lost a shackle. On April 20th of the 8th year of the Zhengzhang reign, the first draft of the Zhengzhang Dynasty, which had been preparing for many years, officially began. The imperial brother is young and has neither established a queen nor any offspring. Many officials and families flock to sending women to the palace. It is said that in just a few days, the prices of rouge, water powder, silk and satin in the capital have increased by several units. In addition to these basic skills, many meritorious officials and relatives from certain sects have come to the Sanshou Palace to visit and discuss relationships, hoping to use the connections of the Empress Dowager to give their daughter a shortcut to the end. The mother consort came from the common people, but on the contrary, she fell into a state of purity. But the other concubines were too annoyed. Especially Empress Dowager 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 Do. After all, Duan Mufei advised, once chosen by the side of the king, I have been honored by my family for several generations. We have all tasted the sweetness, how could we not sharpen our heads and squeeze in? Why do you bother to take care of these idle matters? Empress Dowager nodded and said, if anyone has the ability, then push in. Anyway, I don't have the ability to manage it. To be honest, this draft is in full swing, and Empress Dowager Feng Yu prioritizes virtue and talent. However, when it comes to becoming a concubine, no one knows how to serve people with beauty. So there is always a constant stream of rumors circulating that someone's daughter mistakenly used a secret formula for whitening, resulting in a rash on her face. The daughter of Na Fu collapsed in the selection room in order to lose weight and go on a diet. In the scorching summer, I hid inside and didn't want to go out, thanks to these idle words to pass the time. On the other hand, there are also occasional reports that the illness of Prince Qi has worsened, which is a source of heavy concern. At the beginning of June, the selection process ended, leaving behind more than 20 young ladies. On that day, the news of the premature death of Prince Qi came. While I was greeting the Empress Dowager with Shuepa, Duke Yun came running all the way. Before we could finish greeting him, he said, Empress Dowager, Prince Qi has gone, and Empress Su has fainted from crying. After enduring a long time of wind and rain, the Empress Dowager was also stunned and asked for a long time before saying, when did it happen? Returning to the Empress Dowager, the young prince had already breathed a sigh of relief at noon. Now the mansion has been set up. The Empress Dowager sighed again, well, go tell the emperor that he is ultimately the eldest grandson of the previous emperor. We should not act hastily in future affairs. Xueli also said, last year, when he was in Shangyuan, he called me little aunt and pestered me to feed him glutinous rice cakes, but now he is. After such an incident, no one was in the mood to chat anymore. The Empress Dowager ordered us to leave. After I went back, I told my mother, and she couldn't help feeling sad. She said, Prince Qi and his wife are over 30 years old, and they have only one son under their knees. I don't know how the queen's life will be like this. Then, as if suddenly remembering, she asked, have you heard about the situation with the Lu deputy leading the army when Prince Qi's mansion is in mourning? I couldn't react for a moment and asked, who did Empress Dowager say? Between the lightning and flint, the mother's eyes flashed with a hint of emotion that I couldn't understand. She avoided my eyes and remained quiet, making me suspect that I had heard wrong. But she spoke up again, General Lu once served as a companion in the Pingyang prince's mansion. We met a few years ago and heard that he had already served in the Qi prince's mansion. I don't know how things are now. My mother rarely mentions anything about being in the royal palace, so I didn't think about it and said, this daughter has never heard of her before, but since she is your old friend, you can inquire about her in the future. No, my mother suddenly exclaimed in shock, causing me to tremble. She quickly asked, Mother, what's wrong with you? The mother's face was as pale as silk, and she forced a smile, saying, no, General Lu is in the royal palace and has military power. We cannot have any dealings. Zi Pei, you must listen to your mother's advice and not to others, especially the Empress Dowager, you know. I naturally said yes to my mother, but there was some doubt in my heart. Third update, seeking recommendations and monthly tickets, end of this chapter.